I will be continuing the series on realizing the Four Noble Truths as a Chan practitioner. I believe this is the fifth talk on this in this series. And since it's been a while since the previous talk for some of you, it will be helpful perhaps to understand why I'm talking about what I'm talking about today by connecting back to what I was talking about in previous talks. In the previous talk, I've been talking about Master Shen Yan's discussion of what he called the four paths of actualization, like the way to cultivate the path to be free from suffering. That's the common translation for the word dukkha, the key teaching of Shakyamuni Buddha. And to be free from suffering, we need to stop giving rise to vexations, because suffering is the coming together of whatever is happening in the present moment and the entrenched habits of reacting with vexations. And Master Shen Yan spoke of 6 root vexations, and the process starts with recognizing how suffering is generated. And that's why we study the Four Noble Truths, so that we can see that suffering can cease when we stop giving rise to vexations. Usually that's not how we think about it. We think we need to stop other people from doing whatever they're doing to stop our suffering. But actually, the Four Noble Truths tells us that actually we don't need to wait for other people to change. We can stop suffering by stopping the habit of reacting with vexations. So this is very encouraging, right? Because life is difficult sometimes. We may encounter challenging situations, such as maybe getting sick or being separated from a loved one, maybe from their moving away or from their passing away. And these are often part of what happens in our life, and they need not be suffering when we recognize how suffering is generated. And this recognition is the first step in this path of actualization that Master Shen is talking about. And through the practice involves cultivating moment-to-moment clear awareness of body-mind in this space, and also through the cultivation of right view involving that every moment is the coming together of causes and conditions, that there is no inherently independently existing entity in any phenomenon, including our most cherished phenomenon, ourselves. And also the right view of cause and effect, that the present moment is the fruit or effect of past actions, and our action in this moment condition future moments. So what we do in this moment will shape future moments. What do we want the future to be? So when we practice and realize the true nature of existence, and that's often referred to using the word sunyata, often translated as emptiness, true nature of emptiness, then we establish right view. And Master Shen Yan refers to this as being the second step, the path of seeing. Right? And what this is that we now can truly realize that yes, every moment is brand new. And this is when the first root vexation of wrong view or erroneous view is terminated according to Master Shen Yan. And even when that happens, that is just the beginning, because the deep-rooted emotional afflictions, the 5 other root vexations still need to be subdued, or I like to talk about them being unlearned and released through continued practice. And so, seeing the nature of emptiness really is the beginning of practice. The real work of recognizing and unlearning various entrenched habitual reactivities. You thought seeing the nature of emptiness is not so easy. Subduing, unlearning these very deep-seated emotional affliction, they're very sticky. Also, will take real work. Okay. So, what are these 5 root vexations? These 5 emotional afflictions, often referred to as craving, aversion, ignorance, or sometimes is translated as delusion, arrogance, and doubt. And in my talk in part 4 of this series, I focused on recognizing and working with the emotional affliction of craving and how they show up in our life so that we can stop perpetuating and feeding this habitual reactivity so that we can unlearn them and release them. And slowly they lose power, they become less overwhelming. And that is another way of talking about how they can be subdued. So it's not like turning into our enemy and then try to kill them and put them down or something like that. Is to um, practice to not believe in them and not act on them and not give in to the compulsion or the urge that may show up that we experience to compel us to act on it. So some of you may remember that craving is the entrenched habitual reactivity to that which is pleasant. Right? And now this is pleasant, we like it, and we want more of it. And so this can be some kind of material things, pleasant sensations such as what we experience when we eat things we like, or listen to sound that we love, or see sights that we enjoy, we find pleasing, and we want more. It can also be um, other things that we find pleasant, such as recognition, praise. Right? You're so amazing, you're so smart, or meditative experience such as bliss. We are good at generating craving to anything that we like and find pleasant. And the second emotional affliction here, aversion, is the flip side of craving. It's like oftentimes practitioners will notice, oh, isn't aversion really the flip side of craving? Yeah, basically. So really is an entrenched habitual reactivity to that which we find unpleasant. And so we don't like it. We feel it shouldn't be here. It's not. And so we, because we believe it shouldn't be happening, it shouldn't be here in the present moment, we have this very, very entrenched habit of reacting to it with aversion, hating it. Like it can show in various forms, getting frustrated, getting upset, getting agitated. So some of you may be able to relate to it. So in moments of physical discomfort, right? And there may be some pain in the leg while you are doing sitting meditation, or while you're just sitting there watching TV, whatever it is, the body's not doing what you think it's supposed to do, be perfectly comfortable. It's like get frustrated. It's not supposed to be happening, and get agitated. Or when we don't feel well, like low energy or feeling a little sick, feeling a little under weather or allergy, um, whatnot, and we get irritated, we get upset. And oftentimes we don't stop there. We get upset and we want to find something, someone to blame and take it out on others. And that's why when we do not recognize the how suffering is generated, and not recognize how vexations generate suffering, we would not know to um, stop perpetuating this habitual reactivity. And the result is not only we suffer, but oftentimes we become prone to act in ways that cause harm to others. And of course, like besides physical discomfort, we may find ourselves in various ways being, we feel we're stuck in some situations that we don't like, right? Maybe co-worker we don't get along with, living in a world that's moving in a direction that we're not so happy about, whatever it is. And we find that it's not moving in the way that we would like, and not we cannot control. And so agitated and hating it. That's a version. And that which I'm not going to talk about anymore. I actually am working on a book about unlearning hate, and so I've given a number of talks on that, so you can find them on my website. So instead, I would like to use this time to explore the other three root vexations: ignorance or delusion, arrogance, the common translation for that. I will explain it a bit more, and doubt. Right? Because usually we hear about craving and aversion, craving and aversion. So I want to take a little bit of time to explore these three root vexations. So the first one, that's the emotional affliction of ignorance, um, is the entrenched habits of clinging to the idea of an inherently independently existing self, even after realizing the nature of emptiness. This habit is still there. So, like you experienced, you will have this experiential um, realization of emptiness. We still um, we still have this very entrenched, lingering habits of um, clinging to the idea of an inherently independently existing self. So it is very important that we remember that this is the case, that there is this lingering, entrenched emotional affliction, so that we do not become complacent in our practice and inadvertently allow this entrenched habits of self-centered attachment, clinging to the idea of self, to be perpetuated and strengthened. This is the reason why Master Shen Yan, whenever he talked about the path, especially um, that involves seeing the nature, what's the word we use to refer to enlightenment in Chan, he often would emphasize that seeing the nature does not mean that one is liberated. It does not mean that we no longer have vexations. There are still, that he's referring to the fact that these five emotional afflictions are still there, right? And it's just because because one has realized experientially the Buddha's teachings of emptiness of self, then the moment we notice the habits of self-centered attachments of clinging, then we know we can see that, oh, okay, this the self is empty, and we that it needs to be, this attachment, this clinging needs to be released. um, but I think maybe some of you may think that, well, but I haven't seen nature, and so does it mean that this this practice doesn't really have anything to do with me? I need to wait until I see the nature to be to be making use of this practice of subduing these emotional afflictions? The answer is no, because as Master Shin often said, until before until we see the nature, before that happens, we can rely on the Buddha's teachings and practice applying the teaching in our daily life to see for ourselves, to establish right view, how every moment is brand new, that it's the coming together of causes and conditions. And we can do that anytime, right now, moment to moment, by maintaining moment to moment clear awareness to body mind in this space. Okay? So we can, that's why we can make use of the teaching and understanding of these emotional afflictions, and engage in the practice of unlearning them. In talking about this emotional affliction of ignorance, I like to make use of the way Master Yin Shun explained it in his book, The Way to Buddhahood. I find his explanation of how the emotional affliction of ignorance unfolds very helpful, because oftentimes we talk about ignorance in terms of, oh, it's a self, it's self-attachment, as if we like, oh yeah, it's so obvious, we know what it is. But actually, the way he broke it down in four components, and in a way implicitly, it sort of like shows us how this very entrenched habit shows up and unfolds. Very helpful to in our practice of recognizing this habit. The first uh, uh, step, part, the first step shows up as like thinking that there is a self, he called. So like it's the idea, the very, very, very entrenched habit of thinking that there's me, there's self. Right? And when there's not a permanent, inherently, independently existing entity. Um, so some of you who are familiar with the Heart Sutra might remember in the very beginning of the sutra talking about when the Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara was coursing in the deep prajna paramita, he perceived that all five skandhas are empty, thereby transcending suffering, pointing to the teaching of the 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 self really is the coming together of causes and conditions, five skandhas, the body, sensation, perception, volition, consciousness. And they are all, skandha means heaps, they are like all themselves constantly coming together of causes and conditions. Some of you may have heard of how the body is constantly changing at the cellular level. Right? The cells are constantly moving, engaging in metabolism, taking in nutrients, oxygen, and changing at the chemical level, molecular level. And of course, sensations in our practice of moment to moment clear awareness allows us to see how the body's interaction with the environment is experienced as these constantly changing sensations, and and we can see how every moment is conditioned. There's nothing there that is independently existing, that's permanent. Of course, our sensations and our past experience condition our perception, right? The way we experience the present moment, perceive things. We create idea that this is, like I like this, this is good, this is bad, and believe that is our part of our maybe permanent characteristic or personality um, of our preferences. But like if we really pay attention, we notice our perception of even like the what seems to be the same thing. Like for example, cloudy weather. Like I don't know where you are. I'm in New Jersey. We are going to have a big storm. Actually, does not stay the same. So, for example, now in February, um, like you made the cloudy the sight of cloudy weather may sort of perceived as like bad. It's like, oh, I wish the sun would come out. It's like it's just been like this, for days and days. Like, and we create this idea. I'm the kind of person who likes sun. I'm like the sunny kind of person. Like we create this idea of permanent independently existing self with our view, our preference, our perception. But then, if we pay attention, like in the summer, think about August, days and days and days of 100-degree sunny weather. It's like, this is way too hot, like when's the cloud going to come up? And so suddenly that sunny, like sun loving person's gone. And if we allow ourselves to pay attention, then we will be able to see that our perception of what's good, what's bad, what we like, what we should do, actually the coming together of constantly changing causes and conditions. There's no inherently independently existing entity to be found anywhere. Um, so um, even even though we hear this a million times, and even though we experience it directly, we had a very, very entrenched habit of giving rise to this idea, giving rise to this idea of self, me, I, and as an entity that's separate from the flow of coming together of causes and conditions. And the second uh, part that Master Yunchen talked about here is this what he called self-centered view. So that after thinking that there's a self, like usually we can't even notice when this happened. It follows right away. Then there's this illusion, the idea of self, as and then we firmly held believe in it. Like we believe in this idea. It's just a thought of the self, but we believe in it. And so it's pointing to the habits of holding on to the idea of an inherently existing self and believing in it. That's the next action of the mind, believing in it. And so the idea of self that I kept you talking about sounds very abstract, but really it has a very rich content. All you need to do is take a moment, to pay attention to what shows up. Um, it comes with narrative of who I am, like my life, my characteristic, the way you describe yourself, to others. Um, the kind of person I am, what I'm good at, what I'm terrible at. I never can do this. I'm always can do this. And there are all these are my accomplishments, my position, my status, my family, my job, my world, my view of the world, all my opinions, on and on and on. And story of your life. It's like this is the story of my life. This always happens. These are like some of the examples and the content of the idea of self that shows up that you believe in. And so it involves this belief involves attachment to our idea of how the world is, how it works. Like we may have this idea like the world is unfair, or like no, actually, hard work is rewarded. Like that's how I made my life. We have these beliefs and idea of what we should be doing and what others should be doing, and our idea of what's right, what's wrong, what's good, what's bad, what's proper, all these, and believing them as eternal truth, instead of remembering that these ideas are first constructed, and also they we had these idea experience things this way, perceived this way, because of coming together of the unique set of causes and conditions. And so there's no inherently independent existence. Yet this habit shows up as a compulsion of believing in these views and ideas as eternal inherent truth, forgetting that they're all conditioned, all constructed. And so that's why there's this quality of like being overwhelmed by this compulsion. That's why even though I know everything is empty, you still just get taken over by this habit. And once we after we believe in it, then Master Yin Shen here point out the next thing that shows up is what he was translated as arrogance of self. I actually prefer the translation of self-importance. So like some people translate it as self-conceit. And this involves insistence upon such a self, like which is like there really is this self, and which then condition the erroneous feeling of self-importance. And after that, the next step, the fourth, is what he called self-love, but I like the translation of self-cherishing better. And it has to do with how the feeling, the sense of self-importance, joined with craving and clinging to self as a separate entity. And it really is pointing to this self-cherishing, the urge to the compulsion to preserve the self as an entity, even though we know better. Like it's like now it's like there's the self. And for some of you, may be helpful to try to understand these very abstract ideas with an analogy. So I've been talking about the true nature of existence is that every moment is the coming together of constantly changing causes and conditions. So it's not that things don't exist. It's not that we don't exist. It's that we all exist. It's just we all exist and temporarily as the coming together of causes and conditions, and not as some inherently independently existing fixed entity, and not some separate entity, but more like we're all part of a flow of coming together of causes and conditions. And this often reminds me of this place, actually is at the Audubon. I like to go to this stream where I would be watching the water in the stream. I actually recommend that as a contemplation. You see the water moving around, and everyone, all is water, like we are all part of the flowing causes and conditions. And the water move over rocks, and sometimes they in an eddy or surrounded by leaves, and some from time to time you see water bubbles, the water with some air in it, and so it manifesting as the bubble. So it's like the way our life sometimes manifests. Maybe we call it success. Sometimes there's like a lot of recognition of fame or manifesting because of coming together of causes and conditions, like these water bubbles. Causes and conditions had some air, like that made the certain water molecules show up, manifest as water bubbles, and then they float around, and then oftentimes they would shrink in size and pops and then the bubbles disappear and they're part of the water. In fact, they have never been separated from the flow of water. Right? But um, imagine we have this habit of thinking of ourselves as separate self. Like when we imagine the water bubble, giving rise to the idea that, oh, I'm a bubble. And it's like, I have to stay this bubble. I'm not just water. Um, this insistence upon the self as an entity, apart from the coming together of causes and condition, is just like that. If you hear the water bubble, making such a big deal about being a water bubble and insisting that they're not just water, you think that is so silly. Well, that's what we do. And um, so here Master Sheng Yen point to the erroneous, so this gives rise to the erroneous feeling of self-importance. It's pointing to the fact that as we insist that the self is a separate entity from the flow of causes and conditions, we are insisting the on the idea that the self, yes, everything is impermanent, everything is empty, except me. We insist that the self is exempt from nature of emptiness. It is separate from causes, the flow of causes and conditions. It is special, and thus the notion of the feeling of self-importance, like the feeling that the bubble, I'm a bubble, look like, and or is really like drawing a circle in the air to say this is me, and it is an illusion that we're creating. And now you may be able to notice this insistence of self as separate special entity arises with the emotional affliction of doubt that I mentioned as one of the 5 emotional afflictions. Doubt refers to the resistance to the Buddha's teachings of impermanence, emptiness, non-self, and that there is no inherently permanently existing entity anywhere to be found. Now, while we may know that, it's like, yes, it's like you probably heard that many times in this talk already, right? And maybe from either from experiential realization or from Dharma study. You study that, I know that, yet we resist it. We don't want to accept it. At the emotive level, even though we know the teaching is true rationally, we secretly wish that it does not apply to me. I can be exempt. Myself is exempt from impermanence. Yes, and you at the emotive level, yes, everything is impermanent, except me. Me include all the things that you consider that's part of you. Right? That is why it is called emotional affliction. It is this ignorance is not the same as wrong view, the first Buddhaization. And so this resistance to the teaching causes suffering, and we perpetuate it to hold on to the idea of self as a separate entity from the flow of causes and conditions. Now, this root vexation, doubt, is sometimes considered a branch of the root vexation of aversion, which is reasonable since it is form of resistance. It's like aversion. You're refusing to rejecting that which is happening in the present moment. But I think it is also helpful to um, recognize the depth of our resistance to the Buddha's teachings and not assume that just because we study the Dharma and understand the Buddha's teachings of impermanence, and emptiness, and we agree with it. Yeah, oh yes, I know, like like I know impermanence, everything is permanent. We understand and agree with it conceptually. That we should not assume that it automatically means that the emotional affliction of doubt is gone. So here, Master Shen Yan pointed out that even with experiential realization of emptiness, when one sees the nature, we still need to practice to subdue or release this very entrenched habit of doubt, of resistance to a true nature of existence. One may ask how? How do we do that? How do we unlearn or release this entrenched habit of doubt, even when we know that it is everything is impermanent and empty? Cultivating moment-to-moment clear awareness of mind's reactivity would be crucial for recognizing our resistance to the teachings. So when we are listening to Dharma talk or reading Dharma book, pay attention to how you are reacting to certain teachings. You may notice maybe some like avoidance, subtle avoidance, maybe like the urge to gloss over, skip over, wander off certain when you're reading some certain teaching, or maybe you notice this urge to argue against or to challenge certain teaching, or like with this idea, it doesn't really apply to me, or like really you don't, what it is you don't want it to apply to you. It's like your attachment to yourself taking over there. So maybe you have noticed some of these reactions during this talk. And if that is the case, very good. That means you've been practicing, you've been paying attention. Then you can see how this resistance shows up. And there's no need to hate it. And when you recognize it's showing up this resistance, then you can allow it to melt away, and so that you don't believe in it and act on it. Because if you act on it, then you are really perpetuating this self-centered attachment, believing in the self as a separate entity, and giving rise to this feeling of self-importance. The other thing we can do is to cultivate and strengthen our faith, our confidence in the Buddha's teachings. This is something that Master Shen Yan emphasized in every single retreat. The importance of faith, confidence, trust in the Buddha's teachings. Buddha's teachings, again, we talk about his teachings on suffering, emptiness, impermanence, non-self. How do we do that? When we study the Dharma, and we not just like, oh, study Dharma, oh yeah, I agree. Like we need to identify where we feel confused, or we have nagging questions, like I don't know if this, you identify your doubt, your nagging question, and look for opportunity to clarify them. Maybe when you encounter a teacher, or like when you are reading, books, listening to talks, so that you can clarify your understanding. And this is the first step of establishing trust and confidence in the teaching, because now like you're cleared up some of the what you felt was the contradictions, and then so now you feel like, okay, it makes sense. Then the next thing is to actually apply the teaching to our daily life. Um, to and this is coupled with practicing the practice of moment to moment clear awareness, so that we can see for ourselves that, oh yeah, like, yes, indeed, that um, every moment is brand new, impermanence, that there is no inherently independently existing entity anywhere to be found. Because you look and see, you pay attention. And and more importantly, we notice that, when we remember to practice, remember right view, uh, we suffer less. We give rise to vexations. Um, so then our confidence, our faith in the teaching will deepen and strengthen. And in this way, the Buddha's teachings become internalized, and the habitual reactivity of doubts resisting the teachings uh, will lose its power, because we have strong confidence in the efficacy of the teaching. And so the habits of self-centered attachment may show up, but we can recognize it and release it as soon as we remember the teaching. Right? So it may be helpful to share a story. This reminds me of a story of this practitioner who shared this experience where she was very involved in a group. She was in charge. She was put in charge of running a program that had grown over the years, and because she put a lot of energy into it, like put a lot of thought on how to make it work well, and 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 then something happened, and then what she was doing was being criticized, and she would find herself getting very upset, and noticing how she was like holding to the idea of like the way I did it was the right way, and they just didn't understand it. I just need to get them to see it. And in the midst of this great suffering, she recalled the teaching of emptiness, the teaching of non-self. And because of her strong faith and her confidence in the teaching from her years of practice, as soon as she recalled the teaching, um, she was able to let go of her insistence upon a self and the feeling of self-importance, thinking that like, oh, I'm the one who had been working to make this happen. And being free from that great suffering allowed her mind to be less agitated, and she could see the situation more clearly. Now, it doesn't mean that she suddenly felt that she was all wrong. All she did was like totally wrong, and she had been bad, and negating all that she had done. Rather, what she was able to do is that she could see that, yeah, the program she worked hard to build over the years, using the way she thought was the right way to develop a program, is the coming together of causes and conditions. Like, her effort played an important role, but there were other causes and conditions. And she was able to see that she was suffering because she thought it was her program, mine, and it has to be done her way, my way, and forgetting forgetting that all is the coming together of causes and conditions. And so now the causes and conditions are changing, and she can work with the new coming together of causes and conditions, instead of insisting on her way. And as a result, give rise to less suffering, and she can harmonize with everyone better. So as soon as she noticed how she had given rise to the idea of self, um, mind program, and believing in it, and hold on to it, to what's hers, as separate from causes and conditions. This sense of self-importance. She allows herself to reconnect with a right view, non-self, emptiness, impermanence, and release the urge to cling to the idea of an inherently existing self. So this is good practice. Sometimes we imagine that like a good practice means that, oh, the idea of self won't show up at all. Oh, count on it. Count on it. Do you even know it's showing up, so that you have a chance to release it instead of perpetuating it, strengthening it without your knowing? So in this example, you can see that when the emotional affliction of ignorance and self-centered attachment is activated, recognizing is uprising with moment-to-moment clear awareness, and remembering the teaching, remembering right view, emptiness, non-self, impermanence is crucial. This is why meditative practice to settle the mind and to cultivate clarity of subtle activities and habits of mind is integral to subduing and releasing these root vexations. So, been talking about this root vexation. Some of you may remember the root vexation of arrogance. Some people may misbelieve that the emotional affliction of quote unquote arrogance. Remember, like as I prepare the translation of self-importance, um, only some people believe that it only applies to people who think highly of themselves. Like, oh, I don't think that. So I guess, I don't really have this vexation. And that's why the translation arrogance not great, because it's very loaded in the English language. Now, of course, this habit, this vexation, can show up, can manifest in this way, in a way where one think highly of themselves. Right? This reminds me of the example of this kid. I have this friend whose kid is interesting. Like I said, like like we're having dinner, and then like the adults were talking, and this kid was like getting just all like agitated for no reason. Um, and I asked the dad what's going on. The dad said, "Oh well, he's used to receiving a lot of attention. He's used to um, like being the center of attention in all kind of ways, like performing as a lead character, and like at home, people are all deferring to him. He's like, his brother, like let him get away with all kind of things, and so he has created this idea, this view of himself as the center of the universe. And so here, in the gathering, the adults were just talking among themselves. It's like, how come I'm not the center of the universe here? And he gets very agitated, um, and so suffering a lot. And so you may think, oh, kids, maybe you notice or recognize this habit showing up in some way yourself as well. Um, so through life, sometimes we develop this belief that we are some like a special important entity like maybe in certain setting, like you are treated in this way, like some form of VIP. Maybe you're in this like in this setting where like you have a lot of authority, you have some status, people like give you a lot of deference, um, and or everyone like can recognize you, know of you, like I'm famous. You have this idea about yourself. I'm famous. I'm important. Um, or you make a lot of money. It's like, oh, I'm someone who is like making like a couple $1 million a year. It's like you think it's like I'm this special person, right? And they're not. that's what's happening. But like in this setting, but we carry this idea of ourselves as a VIP or some famous, important, special person to other settings. And so we walk into these other settings, and when people in these other settings don't give you the special treatment to affirm your sense of self-importance, great sufferings. Like, didn't these people like see me? Like how come they don't do what other people do in other settings? Like this little kid who is um, getting very agitated when adults were talking among themselves. So here, the root cause of suffering is the habit of thinking that there is self, forgetting that every moment is the coming together of causes and conditions, and the habit of believing in it and insisting upon setting the self as separate. And this conditioned the feeling of self-importance, feeling some kind of superiority. And thus the belief that like I should be treated as important, special, or superior by others. And of course, you can see that this craving for um, a special treatment itself causes suffering. And when we don't get it, more suffering, aversion, craving. And so it is important to understand that the sense of self-importance is conditioned by the rising of the idea of self and the compulsion, the habit of believing in the views about the self and the world, our relation to it, and is in the habit of insisting upon the self, the several steps that I was talking about, citing Master Im Shin. And it does not matter whether the view about oneself is positive or negative. It's the insistence of identifying with the self as such an inherently existing entity with certain fixed characteristics and relating to the world in a particular way. So this habit is often called some kind of self-centered attachment. This is what I've been unpacking for you, this habit of self-centered attachment. Now, one may be very deferential or believe that their view don't matter, nobody cares about what they think or want, and sometimes we may think of these people as having low self-esteem, but they too have strong self-centered attachment, meaning as a habit, they still have the habit of emotional affliction of ignorance and arrogance here, because they identify with their view of the self and the world. Like nobody cares about what I think, and insist upon this self being permanent and apart from all phenomena, and it deserves especially negative treatments. Like, so the other example, everyone should be, giving me like special good treatment, treating me as a VIP here. Like I deserve this, I deserve especially negative treatment. So oftentimes treatment we inflict on ourselves, harsh criticism, like reaching some form of self-hatred, constantly uh, telling ourselves, I'm so stupid, I never do anything right, I'm always saying something wrong, what's wrong with me? Uh, or in the form of some kind of a self-suppression, make ourselves disappear, not speak up, um, even when we are asked to share our thoughts, because we believe what we say doesn't matter. It's just self-centered attachment to our idea of ourselves. or it shows up in the form of self-deprecation, talking in ways that put ourselves down, because I'm special. I'm especially bad, and so it deserves especially bad negative treatment, right? And without clarity, without clarity about what it is that we are doing, many people mistake this as good practice because they think I'm getting rid of myself. I'm getting rid of myself. I'm getting rid of my ego here. No, you are perpetuating the the idea of there being a separate self. Just the idea that the self is an entity to be gotten rid of is itself an erroneous view. Keep this in mind. Again, remember, everything exists. We exist, but we don't exist the way we assumed ourselves to, as separate, independently existing entity. Rather, we exist each moment as coming together of constantly changing causes and conditions. There is no thing, no entity you call self to get rid of. There is this very entrenched habit of believing in it that we can release, unlearn, stop perpetuating. So remember, the emptiness of self, teaching of emptiness of self or non-self, does not mean that we don't exist. We just don't exist as separate, independently, inherently existing entity with a fixed characteristic. So clarifying our understanding and remember right view, so that when the idea of self as an independently existing entity show up, we don't need to believe it. We can release that habit. Or chances are we believe it because that's the default. We believe it out of habit. And we can practice noticing, oh, I believed it, and we can correct ourselves, recognizing that we just fell for our erroneous view of an independently existing self. And there's no need to blame ourselves, hate ourselves for falling for it, because it's a very familiar thought, and it's very tempting to follow it. And so it's like the feeling, the experience maybe is a little bit like being sucked into a daydream. It's like, it's just like that la la land we go to, like in meditation. And when we notice the urge to hold on to the belief of self, and all the views about who we are, uh, uh, then we can just let the urge melt away. There's no need to hate the vexation, no need to hate that the idea of self exists. And there's no need to hate ourselves. So, so otherwise, hating the idea of self is really reacting to the present moment with aversion. We are generating suffering while believing that I'm quote unquote getting rid of myself. We're just perpetuating ignorance, perpetuating our insistence on the existence of a separate entity that we call self, that require getting rid of. As we practice recognizing how the habit of self-centered attachment shows up, then we can choose not to feed it, not to perpetuate it. And when we are not so busy trying to get rid of the self, that blocks us from seeing what is actually going on in the present moment, then we will be able to recognize as the various way self shows up and recognize the many like delusion we perpetuate about ourselves as we maintain moment to moment clear awareness of body mind in this space. There's a very rich area of practice. It's like lots and lots of these delusion. Some more obvious, some so pervasive. It's like air you don't notice until you see it right in front of your face. We'll notice, for example, various ways in which the idea of self shows up and how we believe in it and hold on to it. Right? So, for example, this idea of self being the one who makes things happen and makes things the way they are at work, at home, community. This reminds me of a of a story that I wrote about in my book Illumination, where I talked about this what I call the "I'm the center of the universe" syndrome that we all succumb to. It's one very popular form of self-centered attachment. And the story is it's about like a movie. It's like an animated movie talking about these roosters. Um, these roosters, like a group of roosters who will like get up early and before sunrise and crow and so this seems was shows that like the other rooster asked this roosters like, why do we have to wake up so early before sunrise and to crow, and when and this rooster said, well, because our crow gets the sun to rise, and they really believe it. And the next scene is that one morning the rooster, well, didn't like somehow slept in and did wake up before sunrise and discovered that the sun rises even when they didn't crow, and they were very deflated. Their sense of self-importance was punctured like a balloon popping. We think this is a funny story. This rooster, how many times have we noticed our idea? How I have to do this to make this happen, and we realize, oh, even when I'm calling sick or I'm not there, like things are still happening. The sun still rises, and in those moments, it helps us see our delusion, our delusion. If we have been practicing. And so one may ask, like, does it mean that there's no point for these roosters to crow anymore? So, of course not. Like some of you may remember in the past, before we had an alarm clock, right? We rely on the rooster to, wake us up. And of course, we had alarm clock nowadays. I still remember a few years ago when I was leading a retreat in Switzerland and in the countryside, and it's really lovely to hear the rooster crowing while we woke up from the morning board, and it's like, yeah, that's what they do. They crow. Like, but the idea that I have to crow so that the sun will wake up, like will rise. That's additional. That's delusion. So pay attention to the way we insist on our notion of self in relation to situations in our life. And when we practice paying attention to these very subtle thought habits, we may recognize a version of this rooster's delusion. Maybe we notice that we believe that I am the one holding this, whatever it is, like maybe holding your family together. Like you're the one doing all these things, getting the people together and keeping it together. Because we believe if I don't do this, the family will fall apart. our idea fall apart. We hold tightly to the belief to justify our actions, and sometimes trying to control people and not respect their wishes. Uh, in the process, causing harm, causing disharmony, and causing a lot of suffering for ourselves. We may feel sort of like a lot of stress and tension from it. And you can notice that even though you've been studying the Dharma, the teaching of non-self and emptiness, at a very emotive level, you notice this resistance to the teaching, and that our action, um, the teaching that yeah, everything is the coming together of causes and conditions, which points to the fact that yes, maybe our action, makes a difference, but it's not what makes it happen, not all of what makes it happen. So if I don't do it, things will just sort of like fall apart. This is our fantasy, our delusion. And but like we don't want to listen to the teaching because we want to hold on to our idea that I have to do this. I have to do it this way to hold my family together in this way. And in the process, it causes a lot of pressure for yourself. I have to do it. It feels like this, the weight of the whole family, the whole world on you. And sometimes it may even breed some kind of resentment. Sometimes like you feel so tired and stressed, like why do I have to do this? But then you're holding on to it. And so even though these are all well-intentioned, recognize it is a form of self-centered attachment. We are giving rise to the emotional affliction of ignorance here. When vexation arises, suffering arises. And of course, you know, this is just set off a chain reaction of like when we have this idea of how a family is supposed to be, and when anyone or anything gets in the way of my family, my effort to hold my family together in this particular way, hatred, aversion, more suffering, more suffering. So some people may react to this as like, okay, are you saying that all the things I do, is just a waste of time? No one is saying that. Watch out for the emotional affliction. You is resisting to the teaching because we want to hold on to our idea of self-importance and preserving the self as that which is holding this together, resisting the teaching that every moment is the coming together of many causes and conditions. Our action only part of it. So if you don't do what you're doing, of course, things would be different. Your family would not be the same because causes and conditions have changed. But we believe that if I don't do what I do, it will fall apart. It will be bad. It's like, we don't know about that. Like whether the new moment will be bad or good, and that is dependent on one's perspective. So notice this habit, this story, this narrative we create in our mind. I have to do this. I'm the one holding this together. If I don't, things will fall apart. It will be a disaster. Watch out. This is a very, very entrenched common illusion we hold in many places. When we notice these habitual reactivity of self-centered attachment arising, unfolding, we can take a pause to allow the compulsion to melt away. And many people find reconnecting with, returning to the breath, to the body, that brings them to the present moment helpful. In charm practice, especially if you have been practicing huatou, you can pick up the huatou in a moment when you're in the midst of this self-centered attachment unfolding. Pick up the huatou. Who is it? And that allows you to wake up from this dream of self-centered attachment that we create, layers and layers and layers of idea of self-views, and see that, I just fallen for a story of my own making. And let's come back to what is actually going on. No problem. So you can see that this new moment, when we stop perpetuating, stop giving rise to vexation, suffering ceases. We don't need to attack, hate the vexation. So I hope this helps you understand a little bit more how we can practice to recognize these root vexations, how they show up, unfold, and how to practice remembering right view, cultivating, strengthening our confidence in the practice, so that these very entrenched habits don't automatically, completely take over and overwhelm us. And when we can see them unfolding and not completely believe in them and act them out, then they lose power. They are less overwhelming, and then we are not perpetuating them or strengthening them. And as we practice this way, these emotional afflictions are slowly being subdued, meaning they are not being fed, not being strengthened. And as we give rise to less vexation, then there's less suffering. And we are cultivating the path to actualization, actualizing the cessation of suffering. I hope this is helpful.
Bảo